topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate, to live, love, laugh, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Fett on ubnradio.com.
And welcome. You are tuned into Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa every Tuesday at naturally high noon on Universal Broadcasting Network, out of the Sunset Gower Studios, where Scandal and Newsweek and Dexter are filmed. But there's no scandal here. In fact, there's no gossip, no scandal, and no K-words, no Kardashian talk at all. Instead, this is a show about hope and happiness, where we find out what is right with the world. So I'm not going to talk about the headlines, all the worst possible things that can happen to human beings, the rapes, the wars, the murders. Instead, I want to focus on what's right with the world and what is right with you. And this month, January, we've been focused on health and good health and how that can influence our hope and happiness. And I'm so grateful to have someone that I actually found on Facebook. I love social media. I've been doing this thing called Dr. Marissa's Pin Up Award for the day, or whenever I get to it. And pin up means positive, inspiring news. And so it flashed by from my Facebook friend Sandra Zillis, and there was this video, and it said, young man beats colon cancer with vegan diet. And I went, oh, and I was in Toronto, where I was over the holidays, my hometown. And I said to my vegan daughter, she's 17, I said, oh, look, Chloe, someone who supports your veganism. And so we watched it, and I was very impressed. And so I Facebook messaged him, and next thing you know, he's on the air with me. So without further ado, we have from Memphis, Tennessee, Skyping in today, Chris Wark. Welcome, Chris.
Hello. How are you? Thanks for having me.
It is so nice to have you here and to talk to you and get firsthand what happened to you way back in 2003. So as per usual, what I like to do with my guests, if you would indulge me, is just sit with your feet on the ground and your palms up, and then gently close your eyes and connect with me for a minute through the breath, taking a deep breath in through the nose and releasing. And again, in through the nose. And connecting with you through chi, eternal energy. And one last breath in, opening my heart to your experience, and releasing and opening your eyes. And we're back. So take me back, Chris, to 2003, and what was going on in your body that you went to the doctor?
Yeah, I was having pain. That's what was going on.
Pain where?
Yeah. Abdominal pain.
Okay.
And, I thought it was an ulcer, and I put it off. I'd never had an ulcer before, and I've never really been to the hospital before. Never had any major health problems, but I...
How old were you?
I was 26.
Okay. And you were working, going to school?
I was working, yeah. I'd been out of school. I was working as a real estate investor, and been married a couple of years.
Okay.
Really just about a year when I started having this pain. So,
Okay.
but I put it off, and I thought, hopefully it'll get better. My body had always healed in the past. Anytime I'd hurt myself, it healed. So I was operating on an assumption that my body would heal.
Okay.
And
so you let it go for how long?
And so probably, I'm still fuzzy on this, but it was somewhere like maybe 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
That I had this sort of nagging problem, and the pain would come and go. It wasn't a constant thing.
Okay.
And usually I would feel it in the afternoon, sort of as after lunch, I would have some pain, and then I would have some pain after dinner, usually within a couple hours after dinner. So it gradually got worse and worse. And then by the fall, I finally was like, okay, I've got to go see a doctor.
Yeah.
So they thought I had an ulcer, gave me some ulcer medication, didn't help. And eventually I ended up getting a colonoscopy. I was referred to a gastroenterologist. They did a colonoscopy, and they found this golf ball sized tumor in my large intestine. And
Any
that was a
history of
surprise.
this? Any history of this in your family?
No, I
Okay.
had no family history.
Okay.
And so the next day he called me and said, well, we sent it to the lab. You have colon cancer. I'm going to have a surgeon call you. We've got to get this out of your body as soon as possible before it spreads and kills you.
Okay. And your reaction was?
Yeah. So my reaction was, okay. You know, I mean, like any cancer patient, you know, when you get a diagnosis like that, everything is basically a whirlwind.
Yes.
And the way the conventional cancer industry works is they want to get you on the conveyor belt as quickly as possible. And you know, not to fault them too much here, but they're doing the best they can.
Right, and they believe that.
Happen.
Right. They believe that this is the only way to treat cancer.
Correct.
Okay. Because you do say industry, and I absolutely agree with you. But I want to make sure too that we're balancing out. It's not what I love about your approach and what you say and what you've said on your website and your video is that, you know, you don't have to freak out. You don't have to, you know, get on that conveyor belt right away. But there's so many forces because of the industry, which they are actually doing what they think is best. You're right. You know, they're doing the best that they can. But that initial rush and your words of wisdom around don't freak out, I love. And I wanted to make sure that we nailed that first point for listeners.
Thank you. And I'll come back to that too, because I learned that later.
Right.
But so like I was a very typical cancer patient. They rushed me into surgery. I didn't have any time to think about my life or my health or why I had cancer or what I could change, what I could do different. Had surgery I was diagnosed in December, had surgery about a week and a half later. So I was diagnosed, actually, I think it was December 22nd. And then I had surgery on the 30th.
That was your Christmas present.
Yeah, that was it. And they wanted me to have surgery the next day, you know, and I was like, I don't want to be in the hospital on Christmas. So we delayed it a week.
Okay.
So anyway, they took out a third of my large intestine. They took out the tumor. When they went in, it was worse than they thought. It was stage 3C. They were hoping it was stage 2.
Okay.
And when I woke up, they gave me the bad news. Well, you know, you're worse than we thought. You're going to need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy as soon as you recover from surgery. So maybe starting about 6 weeks after surgery.
Wow.
At that point, it was like, oh boy, you know, I hadn't even considered chemotherapy, and because they told me I probably wouldn't need it. And now I'm thinking about it. Now I'm thinking, wow, you know,
just because I'm not familiar, and I don't know how many listeners are familiar with cancer, what's the difference? Why do they say stage 1 and it's stage 4 is the worst, right? So you had stage 3, which is pretty bad.
Yeah. So in terms of colon cancer, stage 1 would be a small tumor.
Okay.
That's on one side of the colon wall. Stage 2 means it's broken through to the other side of the wall of your large intestine.
Okay.
So it's bigger. It's, you know, basically it's bigger.
Okay.
Stage 3 means it has metastasized to your lymph nodes.
That's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. That means it's spreading. And stage 4 means it is metastasized to other organs.
Okay.
So there may be spots in your liver, your lungs, your bones, or whatever. So I wasn't stage 4. I was stage 3C, which is just right before 4. So it was on its way to my liver.
Okay.
That's basically what they told me. So there were a couple things that happened in the hospital. So initially I thought, okay, I guess I'm the cancer patient. I guess I'm going to do chemo. You know, like, I guess this is my life now.
Right.
And it was pretty depressing feeling.
Yes.
And but a couple things happened that were serendipitous, and it started me on this. It sort of you know, it's almost kind of like you know, you're driving down the road and you get sideswiped, and another car kind of knocks you into the wrong lane.
Right.
So it was kind of like there were some things that happened that were sort of like that. So the first one was,
but in a good lane, not in one that you're going to get run over in.
Well, initially it was just a different lane.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not in one you're going to get run over.
Okay.
But into a different lane. So are almost like knocking you into a lane that ends up being an interstate exit. Okay.
Yes, I can see that. I can see that.
That's the best analogy.
And let me just, for anyone who joined us late, you are listening to my fabulous guest, Focus on Health, Chris Wark, calling in from Memphis, Tennessee. And I found him on Facebook, and he beat cancer. And that's his site, and this is his story. And you're listening to Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa. Go back to it, Chris. I have to do this because this is radio.
Hospital.
So you took an exit that you weren't planning on taking.
Yeah. So this is what happened. The first meal they served was a sloppy Joe.
In the hospital.
Oh.
Okay. Our connection's bad. Did something happen on your end?
No.
Okay. We just had a little hiccup. Go ahead. So you had a sloppy Joe.
Yeah, they served me a sloppy Joe after cutting out a third of my large intestine, and I thought, why are they serving this kind of terrible cafeteria food to sick?
Right. And
it's, especially someone with cancer. That didn't make sense to me at all.
Okay.
The second thing that happened in the hospital was the day I was checking out, the surgeon, he came in there, asked him, I said, is there any food I need to eat or whatever? Because I didn't want to go home and screw it up, right? I didn't want to go home.
You want to be a good patient.
Sauce.
Right.
Yeah, or some Doritos and then screw up the whole surgery. So you just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. That was his advice.
That's it.
That was his nutritional advice. So again, I'm like, I'm just thinking, man, I can't believe they don't care they don't care what I eat.
Right.
Doesn't matter, I guess.
Right.
So went home, and as I was recovering from the surgery, I was thinking about my life, and I was thinking about chemotherapy, and I'd never really actually known anyone that had gone through cancer in my life.
Okay, so this is very unfamiliar.
Yeah, it was completely. But yet I'd seen a few people out in the world that were obviously cancer patients, and they looked so scary, right? They looked so sick and so bad.
Right.
And I knew that the chemotherapy is what made them look that much.
Yeah.
And I knew it was poor, and I knew it was extremely toxic and your hair falls out, right? I knew.
Right. My dad went through it. He had lymphoma. And it is true what they say, that it's not necessarily the cancer that kills you, it's the chemo.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I knew very little, but enough to be wary of putting poison in my body. And really, as the more I thought about it, the less it made sense, because the idea of poisoning my way back to health did not make sense.
Okay.
So
good way to put it.
I had this dilemma because they were telling me I needed to do chemotherapy, and my instincts, my intuition was saying, no, don't do that.
Okay.
Do not do that.
Where was your wife in all of this?
So she was, she was with me.
Yes.
So she was with me, but she didn't really understand what I was thinking. I had not told her everything that was on my mind. We were both just scared.
Right.
And so we prayed together about it. And, I just said, God, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, just show me. I don't know what to do. And I'm afraid, and I'm confused, and, help.
Yes.
So 2 days later, I got a book that was mailed to me from a man in Alaska who I've never met, but he knew my dad. And he sent me a book that was a pretty bold move, really. And he sent me a controversial book called God's Way to Ultimate Health.
What?
And, hey, the title says God's Way to Ultimate Health. Maybe this is an answer to prayer.
Right.
So I start reading the book, and turns out the man who wrote it had colon cancer, just like me. But he didn't have surgery or chemo or radiation. He radically changed his diet and his lifestyle, and his body healed. And as I read his testimonial and read as his book talked a lot about nutrition and why we're sick, because we're eating all this man-made processed food, and we're eating a Western diet, also known as the standard American diet.
Yeah.
And this is the cause of so many of our diseases.
Yes.
Chronic diseases like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, etc. So I'm reading this book, and I'm like, man, this guy makes a lot of sense. And I knew within the first chapter it was an answer to prayer. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind. I knew it.
Yeah.
And it was a powerful,
a direct answer, answer in the mail.
Yeah. And it was a very powerful and very emotional moment for me, sitting there in my living room on the couch by myself, reading, the first chapter of this book and reading this guy's story. And so I knew that this was it. I asked for something. This is what I got.
Yes.
I'm doing it.
You got an answer.
Just like that. This is what I'm doing. I got it.
Right.
loud and clear. I
Mhm.
called my wife. I was super pumped, and I was like, I got this book and I've read it, and now I know what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do this raw food diet. I'm going to start juicing, and I'm not going to do chemo. And she's like, oh no, you're still doing chemo.
Yeah.
You have to do chemo.
Right. Which is the normal answer, which is
Yeah,
the loving,
doctors-
normal answer.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And she was really concerned. Well, she calls her mom, and then people are, all the family members are calling each other, and then they're calling me like saying, we heard you're thinking about not doing chemo, and you really have to do chemo because the doctors know best.
Right.
And, don't you think if something else worked, they would know about it and they would be using it?
Mm.
And, I know someone that tried alternative therapies and they died.
Mm. Yes,
And
the chemo intervention.
Yes. And so I all of a sudden had this fresh injection of fear and doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
And so that made things even more complicated. The next day, I mean, this all happened within just a few days, right? I immediately changed my diet. I jumped right on board, bought a juicer, like I'm doing this, right?
Right.
And family members are like, please, will you just talk to the oncologist? We just go hear what he has to say. Of course, my wife wanted me to as well. And they love me, right? They're just trying to help.
Of course.
I don't fault them for it at all. But what they didn't know is how much anxiety and stress they were producing, they were causing for me. But it's okay. I forgive them. It's fine.
Right.
So I agree to go meet the oncologist. We go to the clinic. The parking lot's packed. The waiting room's packed. I sit down. I'm looking around, just trying to connect with somebody.
Right.
Just trying to figure out who are these people. Who are the people in this group that I'm now a part of, right? And the cancer patient club. And I'm looking around the room, and first of all, you understand, I have like long kind of shaggy hair. I was a musician, like kind of a rocker dude. I had a handlebar mustache. I was like, I'm looking around, and everyone in there was literally gray hair.
Right.
Gray hair, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old people, and me and my wife, and we look like teenagers.
Right.
And the television is on, and we're waiting to go back, and the Today Show's on, or one of those morning shows, and out comes Jack LaLanne. Jack LaLanne is the guest of the moment.
Right.
And he comes out and he starts going off about nutrition. He's saying, this is the reason we're sick, because we're eating all this processed food and fast food and junk food and too much meat and dairy. And we need to go back to eating fruits and vegetables and juicing. And I just couldn't believe that was on the television.
Right. At that moment.
At that very moment where I was sitting in the cancer clinic.
That's
right?
it. Yep. Yeah.
And I turned and looked at my wife and I was like, can you believe this is on right now?
Right.
And she was like, yeah, it's pretty weird. So we go back and see the oncologist, and any cancer patient listening to this interview knows exactly what I'm talking about right now. But, oncologists and even a lot of doctors, they become very robotic over the years. Before they come in to see you, they're flipping through your chart real quick. Who's this guy? What's he got? Okay. You get the quick summary.
Right.
So they walk in. Okay, you're Chris. Hi, Chris. I'm the doctor. You've got colon cancer. This is the treatment we recommend. You have about a 60% chance of living 5 years with this therapy, and just the standard pitch, right? But that didn't inspire much confidence.
Right.
60% chance of living 5 years.
That's not a lot.
There was no mention of cure, right? And so I said, well, are there any alternative therapies available? And he said, no, there are none. If you don't do chemotherapy, you're insane.
Nice.
Yeah. I said, we asked him about the raw food diet. I think my wife did. Already on it. She said, well, can he do the raw food diet? And he was like, no, you can't do the raw food diet. It'll fight the chemo. Yeah. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And then I asked him if there were, I already told you, I asked him about alternative therapies. And the rest of the meeting was basically a blur. Like I just kind of, it was like deer in the headlights,
How much time did he give you without doing chemo?
I didn't ask him.
Okay.
I didn't ask him.
He just said you were insane if you didn't do it.
Right. Okay. And I didn't say I'm not doing chemo. He just asked some questions, but based on the questions we asked, he I'm sure understood that I was thinking about not doing chemo.
Right.
So, I went into that clinic full of confidence in what I was doing. And after that brief few minutes with this oncologist, I was so afraid. I mean, cancer clinics are like the fear factory. I mean, they use
Right.
fear to motivate you to take immediate action. It's
Yep.
like, if you don't do what I say, you're going to die.
Right. Right.
And, if you don't have this surgery, take these drugs, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you do have surgery and take these drugs, you may still die. So
yeah, a lot of good news. My dad's
Right.
favorite joke was when he was in the middle of all that treatment. He said, "What's the difference between God and a doctor?" Have you heard that joke?
Oh, I've heard it, and I forgot the punchlines.
God doesn't think he's a doctor.
Yeah.
So yeah, he wasn't real happy
Yeah.
with the whole thing.
I walked out of that office
Mhm.
and made an appointment at the front desk to get a port put in to start chemotherapy in a few weeks,
Okay.
because he had just, used fear to
Right.
manipulate my emotions, and I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so we walked out, we sat in her car, and we held hands, and we cried, and we prayed together. And that was one of the scariest moments of my life right there. I mean, I was so afraid and so confused. And but fortunately, I still had time to recover from surgery. I still had a few more weeks. And it was during that time that I really pressed into God and really thought about my life and my situation and what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I had to make a very difficult choice. I had, on one hand, a brightly lit, well-paved road that everyone was going down.
Right.
And everyone who went down that road got all the encouragement and support and everything they needed, right? All their needs were met.
Right.
And it's almost like the conveyor belt at the airport, you just stand on it. You don't even have to walk. It just takes you down.
Yep.
And then you get on an express train that's like
Easy.
fully luxury train. You just get on and they just whisk you away.
Road more traveled.
On my right hand, I had a jungle with no path that I had to hack through alone at night. Okay? Right. In the dark. And those were the stark contrast, my two options, right? It was like, on one hand, it was like everybody supports this decision, and the other hand, it's just me and Jesus.
Right.
So
but he's pretty big.
Yeah.
God's
yes.
God's for you. Yeah. So but anyway,
I'm telling you, I knew that was the path. Right. I knew that was the one. And it was still very hard to make that decision, but I knew that was it. And what's so tragic is so many cancer patients I've talked to hundreds and coached them, counseled them, everything. And almost everyone I talked to says, I didn't want to do chemo. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't want to do it. I didn't have a good feeling about it, but everybody was telling me I had to do it. And that's the only reason I did it, is because everybody said I had to.
Right.
And now I'm worse, right? Yeah. It didn't work. And now I'm stage 4. And
I know. I have regrets on that. I told my dad he didn't have a choice. He had to have chemo. And in the end, that's what, he died of, was just the effects of that. So I particularly personally feel vested in making sure your message gets out there.
Well, listen. Yeah. And you're doing the best you can with the information you have at the time.
Right.
And so I was a no-show to the chemo port appointment. They're calling my house. They sent me a certified letter.
Wow.
We're concerned about you. Please call your doctor immediately. Your life is, life is at risk, that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I'm just running away from these people. Like, I'm never going back there.
Right.
And I found a local clinical nutritionist who was trained as a naturopath and herbalist and was very much into clinical nutrition as well. I found him through some sort of serendipitous events that he was a godsend. And then he connected me with an integrative oncologist that was in Memphis who was a really old man that had come back out of retirement because he was basically just bored and wanted to help more people. And so I found people that supported me. So in the beginning, my mom was a big supporter. Okay. And then these two other people, a nutritionist and an oncologist. And that was it. Yeah. I mean, that was it.
Yeah. And your wife is now cautiously supportive.
No.
I'm
just going to go ahead and say it. And she would, if she was in this interview, she would tell you the same thing.
Okay.
No. she was not happy with my decision, and we
Okay.
had some marital conflict, right?
Wow.
It was very tense because she was afraid I was going to
Yeah,
die. She was
yeah.
afraid I was making a huge mistake, and then
Right.
I was too, right?
Right.
I was afraid of being of being perceived of as a fool, which
Right.
I knew people were thinking that.
Right.
And but ultimately I didn't want to die a fool. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's one thing to be thought of as
Absolutely.
a fool while you're doing something
Right.
radical,
Right. Right.
but it's a different thing to fail at it
Right.
and then your critics be
confirm
right.
it. Right. You're confirming.
Yeah, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that prospect, but
Right.
but I knew I had to, I knew I had to change my whole life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my reasoning was really pretty simple. This is what I was thinking. I thought, I believe I have some very simple core beliefs, and I think whenever you're challenged with something that is this life shattering, right? You kind of are going to default to your core beliefs, and you kind of have to build from there when you make a difficult decision in life. And so what were my core beliefs? Well, I believe that God created the earth for us. I believe that everything that is on the earth, that he gave us everything we need, right? So food that comes from the earth was created for us to eat, right?
Yes.
Fruits and vegetables. I don't have a hard time believing that. It's very easy for me to believe that. And I also knew I'd been eating junk food and fast food and McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, like eating all this crap for years and years. And for whatever reason, I got sick before the average person does. But regardless, I knew I could make radical changes to my diet and lifestyle. And I was excited about doing that. I was excited about seeing what would happen if I took this dramatic, massive action.
Right. Right.
And so that propelled me. It wasn't just fear. It was also excitement. So as I adopted this protocol, raw vegan diet, I was drinking 64 ounces of basically mostly carrot juice every day, plus eating giant salads and having fruit smoothies, and then working with this naturopath nutritionist. He, over time, after about 90 days, modified my diet a little bit because I felt great on the raw vegan diet, but I wasn't getting enough calories.
Okay.
I have a very high metabolism. And so people that have a slow metabolism, that are overweight or whatever, they do phenomenally well as a raw vegan.
Right.
But I needed more cooked food. I need more calories. Cooked food has about twice the calorie content as raw because when it's cooked, it condenses and you tend to eat more of it.
Okay.
Right. If you ever cooked spinach, how huge it is?
Yes.
And then you cook it down, it's like, where did it all go?
Right.
So anyway, he added cooked food back to my diet. So I went from being 100% raw to about 80-20, 80% raw.
And no meat, right?
No, he
meat.
He actually had me start eating meat again.
Okay. But the first part, it was no meat at all, right?
The first 90 days was no meat.
Just pure
vegan. He said, I want you to eat some wild caught salmon and maybe some organic lamb once or twice a week. And so I was like, at that point, I wasn't vegan to save animals, right? I was vegan to save
one of my questions.
myself.
Right, right. No PETA here.
Yeah,
this was
selfish
Chris
decision.
Okay.
I just want to be very clear. Like,
right.
I didn't do it for animals. I was like, I'm trying to live. And I trusted this man. And when he said you need to eat a little more cooked food, a little bit of animal food, just a little bit more protein, I was like, okay, like I'll do whatever.
Right.
Like,
and this is how long into? A couple months or
3 months in?
3 months. Okay.
So yeah, you want me to go eat cow patties? I will do it.
Okay. Right.
So I changed my diet a little bit. Again, 80% raw, 20% cooked, with a few servings of animal protein per week. And then that's what I maintained. That was the plan. And I took a lot of supplements. I had vitamin C IVs done. I did everything I could find and afford, and I kept reading and researching. So I just became like insatiable, and an insatiable desire for knowledge, to learn, to find other people that had healed. And at that time, the internet was like not helpful. Okay.
It's a worst case scenario. And with
no,
that,
it wasn't. I mean, look, this was 2004. There was no YouTube. There was no social media.
Right.
And whatever little websites that existed about alternative therapies, they were very sketchy and homemade, thrown together, and kind of like, I don't know. I mean, they just didn't inspire a whole lot of confidence either. But I found a few people that were huge. Like Dr. Lorraine Day was a huge influence and encouragement to me. Her story about healing breast cancer. She's an MD. I found Dr. Richard Schultz, the naturopath, sort of this legendary, crazy alternative doctor that is just amazing guy. And then, of course, George Malcolmus, who wrote the first book I read. And then I found Jordan Rubin, who had written just his first book, Patient Heal Thyself. So I was just going from book to book to book.
Right. And if you're listening, and hopefully you know you can get this replayed, because if you know anyone with cancer or you have cancer yourself, Chris is giving you a path here that you don't have to travel like a jungle. So he's like mowed stuff down.
That's right.
So there's a path here. And we're going to just take a quick break to thank the sponsors of this show. And we'll be right back with the amazing story and the inspiration, Chris Wark, who beat colon cancer with his diet and has a lot of wisdom now about food and health and who we are. So we'll be right back in 2 and 2.
Do you want more life balance? Are you 88% happy with your health and well-being, your relationships, your livelihood? If yes, do the Abundance. If no, and you'd like a life balance tune-up and align those head, heart, spark plugs and smog check the BS belief systems that are clogging your lifelines, contact Dr. Marissa, the kinder, gentler Dr. Laura at www.4balance.org for a session on the air or a private one on the beach. Have you ever had a sweet potato cookie? Be the talk of the holiday table with Yam Good cookies and 4 unique tastes. All sweet potato with either pecan, ginger pecan, pineapple coconut, even topped with almonds. Available in West LA. So follow us on social media and visit www.yamgoodcookies.com to order. A holiday treat launched in the season of Thanksgiving that will now be enjoyed all year long. So have a Yam Good holiday.
And we're back, and you are tuned in to Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa every Tuesday and Thursday on UBN and now on NBC News Radio, syndicated on Thursday nights. And today we are talking our January focus on health, and we're talking about cancer and how to beat cancer without going through chemotherapy. And I went to the stats books, Chris, if you can indulge me for a second. You mentioned on your site that we have tripled the incidence of cancer now in the last 100 years. Men have a risk of developing cancer. 1 in 4 have a risk of dying from it. 1 in 2 have a risk of developing it, and 1 in 4 have a risk from dying from it. For women, it's 1 in 3 for getting it and 1 in 5 for dying. So men are slightly in a worse case than women are, but nevertheless, I mean, the incidence of cancer is on the rise. And I had a guest here early on in my radio career, Fran Drescher, who you may remember from The Nanny.
Sure.
And she also went through cancer and has developed this amazing site called trashcancer.com. And so there are resources, and you were listing some things to go through. This whole idea, and I want you to sum up what you have, your most recent video. I just love the way that you've identified 4 areas that we have to change if we want to be healthy, because I agree with you wholeheartedly that there's no accident that there's more cancer, because we are our habits in this generation alone. There's more people on antidepressants. There's more people on, all these maladies come from the way we're living, and we live a much different life than we used to. So that's your segue.
Yeah. Well,
Give me those 4
this is
things.
what I love to talk about too.
Yes.
I've told my story a million times. And of course, anybody that wants to know more, they can find me at chrisbeatcancer.com. But
yes.
So, it's really important to understand why we have cancer. Why are cancer rates exploding? Why is it they've tripled since 1900, and why they're still going up and up and up, and cancer is about to overtake heart disease as the number 1 killer of Americans. Currently, cancer is killing 580,000 Americans a year. Okay?
That's a lot.
That's just Americans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but here's what people don't know. They don't know, most of them, or have never thought about the fact that there are other countries in the world. Number 1.
Yeah, we're a little centric.
Yeah.
What do you call someone who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual, 2 languages, bilingual, 1 language, American.
Yeah. So and these other countries in the world have much different cancer rates than us, and it depends on whether or not they've been westernized. So United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, most of Europe, Australia, all of these first world countries, industrialized, westernized countries, have cancer rates that are pretty equal. But if you look at third world countries like India, Africa, China, in South America, they have very, very different cancer rates. They're much lower. And
Interesting.
there's a reason.
Yes.
It's not genetic. They don't have better genetics than us. America's the melting pot. We have every race here. Okay.
Right.
So an easy example is in Japan, the breast cancer rate for Japanese women is about 6 times lower than it is for American women. Except for Japanese women that live in America. Their cancer rates are the same as American women.
Interesting. Okay. So what are we doing here that they're not doing there?
What's different? And there's 4 key differences. Okay.
Yep.
The first one is diet. Countries with the lowest rates of cancer, by and large, eat a plant-based diet. They're not vegans, but they eat mostly plants, anywhere from 90 to 99% plant-based. Okay, the China study was one of the largest studies ever conducted. It was the largest epidemiological nutrition study ever conducted. And there were no vegan provinces in China, but most of the provinces were, especially the rural areas, were plant-based. Same applies to rural Africa. Well, so what are they eating? They're eating lots of starchies. They're eating the food that it's been popular to say these are the worst foods to eat, and actually the healthiest countries eat them. What am I talking about? I'm talking about potatoes, okay? Yams, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, rice, plantains, bananas, corn, beans, and yes, the one food group everyone is terrified of at the moment, and that would be grains. Okay?
Yeah.
These are the staple foods of the healthiest people on earth. Now, again, do they eat meat? Yes, but typically in the poorer regions where they have the longest lifespans and the lowest incidence of cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, and all the Western diseases, right? They're called Western diseases because Western nations have them in abundance. They are eating very little meat and dairy because these are precious commodities.
Right. It's not
if you
easy.
imagine what it's like to live in an African village in a remote part of, let's just say, Niger, right? You're not going to have a grocery store or a supermarket. There's no big factory farms.
No butchers.
There's nowhere to buy food. Most of the food they eat is either they've grown it or they've traded for it.
Right.
And if you owned, let's say, if you owned 20 or 30 chickens that you were raising, you're not going to kill a chicken for dinner every night because in about a month you're going to be out of chicken.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you have some cows, you're not going to kill a cow and try to eat it once a week. You're going to run out of cows. So
we have a lot to learn from these quote unquote third world countries and change our diet to more plant-based. And my 17-year-old would be so thrilled. Well, she's going to be listening to this because she's a big believer and she doesn't call it a diet. She calls it a change in lifestyle.
It is a lifestyle.
So vegan, little bit of meat, but mostly plant-based. So that's number one.
The good news is, and you know, vegans can be a very prickly bunch. Okay.
Yes, I live with one.
The one little problem I have with some vegans is they have this all or nothing mentality. Either you're 100% vegan or you're like a horrible person or whatever.
Right.
But the truth is, when you study the healthiest populations on earth, they do eat a plant-based diet. They eat very little meat and dairy, but they're not vegan.
Right.
And so I don't believe you have to be 100% vegan to have optimal health.
My other daughter will be very happy to hear that.
Yeah. But I do believe you need to eat mostly plants. So what does that look like practically? Practically, a diet that's 98, 99% plant-based, that means you might eat meat once a week.
Okay.
Maybe twice some weeks.
What's your typical day? What do you eat? Like, what do you eat for breakfast?
So for breakfast, I'll eat a huge bowl of oatmeal. Okay. And I'll put hemp seed, flax seed, chia seed, almond butter, cinnamon, and then some type of dried fruit, typically raisins, or sometimes we're able to buy like a mixed bag of dried fruit with dried blueberries, cranberries, and raisins and stuff like that.
Sounds delicious. And it just sounds like your wife. Do you have kids?
I have a wife. I have 2 daughters who are 10 and 6.
Do they eat with you?
They do. They eat. Yes. Okay. Essentially, yes. I mean, they're not as my kids are not as like health nerdy as I am because
Okay.
they're kids. And
Right,
if
right.
they were allowed to eat candy all day, every day, believe me, they would.
Okay.
Okay.
Got
So
it. Okay. What do
I
you have
wish
for
I could,
lunch?
yeah, I wish I could brag on them and say that they only want to eat vegetables all day, but it's not true.
Right.
Lunch for me is a giant smoothie. So I just finished my lunch, and because I'm 2 hours ahead of you,
Right.
and that was about 4 cups of frozen berries, a banana, 6 dates, 24 ounces of water, 2 huge handfuls of spinach, a handful of almonds, a handful of walnuts, 6 tablespoons of hemp seed, and I think that's all I threw in there today. But
Okay.
it's a huge Vitamix full, right?
Right.
It's like 50 ounces of smoothie. It's giant.
Sounds wonderful. And
It's
I'm one of
awesome.
those that, if anyone says I will never be a vegan, or I will never be a vegetarian, or I will never have shakes and smoothies, that was me. And the wisdom in understanding the shifts and the changes that we need to make for good health. I can't do what I do unless I'm in good health. So that the don't ever say I will never because
That's
it'll
right.
come
Yeah.
back to bite you. Okay,
Never
dinner
say that.
time. What do you have for dinner?
My wife cooks dinner almost every night. We eat together as a family, and
Nice.
she'll make a variety of vegetables. So we might have a salad, but then she'll have like maybe rice or quinoa. We'll have maybe black beans or garbanzo beans or black-eyed peas. We might have asparagus or Brussels sprouts, or she might cook some greens like collard greens, mustard greens. We might have kale or spinach. And so it's just your typical sort of like a plate with 3 or 4 different cooked vegetables and maybe some raw veggies like the salad situation.
Great. And when did she
and
come
then-
around?
What's that?
When did she come around? When did she stop fighting?
Oh, well, diagnosed 11 years ago.
Okay.
And
So
time changes things.
yeah.
So over the years, in the beginning, she was very hesitant. And, I mentioned this earlier, but it really caused strain because I was reading and learning and getting excited about nutrition. And I really wanted her to jump on board with me, but she was very reluctant to do it.
What's her name?
She kind of resented
Oh.
all of that information because she thought it was going to end up killing me.
Right. Of course.
But as I got better,
She started.
up to, and so did other family members.
Good.
And so now we're completely on the same page, which is great.
And what is her name?
My wife's name?
Yes.
Micah.
Micah, this is a
Yes.
love shout out from Dr. Marissa. Thank you so much for your role. It could not have been easy. So I just wanted to acknowledge you. So hopefully
That's very
she'll
sweet.
get to
Thank
see
you.
this. All right. So let's go back to the 4 things. So the one thing is we need to change our diet. The second thing is what?
Okay, second thing is lifestyle. You have to take care of your body and make good choices. One of them is exercising. Breast cancer patients who exercise a minimum of 30 minutes a day of just walking and ate 3 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day had a 50% decreased risk of recurrence after 9 years.
Okay.
That's one of many studies on the benefits of exercise, not only with cancer, but with reversing all types of disease, promoting health in the body. So exercise is essential.
Okay.
The other lifestyle factors that are involved are not smoking. Hello. Number 1 cancer killer is smoking.
Yep.
Number 2, which goes actually back to number 1, is not overeating, because obesity is the second leading cause of cancer death in America.
Say that again. I want everybody to hear this.
I will repeat it. Smoking is the number 1 cause of cancer death. Obesity is the number 2 cause.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is not Chris's like fantasy. This is from the National Cancer Institute.
Yeah. And I think we've gotten to we've done that overkill on looksism and discriminating for people who are overweight, and we really should. But I'm going to put the moose on the table. We're hurting ourselves when we're obese. We're hurting ourselves. I just had to deal with that one myself, and just watching myself. 2 kids. I had a hip replaced a couple of years ago, so I have every reason to sort of, I had a lady at the gym the other day come up to me and go, "Didn't you used to be really thin?" I was like,
that was nice.
So but it was good. It was a wake up call, and so I'm starting also to put all of that back in, and really getting excited about it the way that you were talking about too. So anyway, sorry, that's 2. So exercise, lifestyle, 3.
The other lifestyle factors are sleep. You've got to sleep. You need 6 to 8 hours of sleep, but probably closer to 8 for most people. And you need to sleep in total darkness. Right? Most people are not getting enough sleep. They're working too much. They're not resting. They're not playing. They don't have any playtime. It's all work and sleep and stress and go, right? That kind of a lifestyle, that's a Western lifestyle. Like they don't live that way in South America. They don't live that way in Africa. They don't live that way in China, right?
Right.
There's a lot more leisure time, and that's important. And taking a day of rest, which is a biblical concept, is vital to health. Wow. So of course I do that. And then drug use. So again, this is lifestyle factor. Illegal drug use clearly is going to harm you, but prescription drug use is just as harmful because prescription medications are toxic to the body. They may give you some relief from a pain or a condition temporarily, but long-term use of any prescription drug will cause all kinds of side effects and damage and new problems in your body.
Yes.
And there is no prescription drug that can fix a problem that a diet and lifestyle change cannot.
Say that one again.
There is no prescription drug that can fix a problem in the body that a diet and lifestyle change cannot also fix. And actually, prescription drugs don't even fix the problem. They only hide
mask,
and alleviate the symptoms,
yes,
right?
Correct.
And
that is correct. And they create new problems.
And they create new problems.
It's like people, it's almost ridiculous, the side effects that they list on TV, because it's like it is worse than what you had, but people just take it anyways.
And truth is simple, by the way. Truth is so simple. It really is simple. Lies are complicated. Okay. And the truth is, there are so many diseases that can be reversed by simply adopting a plant-based diet. I mean, it's amazing. You don't have to spend a whole bunch and thousands of dollars and do all these crazy therapies. No, if you just radically change your diet, start eating tons of fruits and vegetables, beans and grains and nuts and all this great stuff from the earth,
and
raw
exercise,
and cooked, and exercise, right?
And sleep, and avoid the things that we know we should avoid. And then the last one,
the fourth factor is stress.
Yes,
okay,
my favorite.
And stress is really the mother of all the other problems, because stress actually leads us to self-destructive behavior. Stress leads us to overeat. Stress leads us to not get good rest, to become a workaholic, to develop a drinking and a drug problem. Stress leads us to make bad decisions and treat people badly, and not only abuse others, but abuse ourselves. So stress is huge. It is so huge in the Western world because we have so many problems and responsibilities and obligations, and we're on Facebook, we're looking at all these other people and how great their lives look like they are, and we're jealous and envious of others. And so all negative emotions produce stress in your mind, and which translates to stress in your body. And guess what? Stress in your body raises your stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, which suppress your immune system. And every cancer patient I've ever talked to had major chronic stress in their life before they were diagnosed. Usually in the 3 to 5 period before they were diagnosed, they had some major stress.
Interesting.
It's often a very traumatic, stressful event. So one of my favorite examples is a girl I coached recently who had her best in a year and a half before she was diagnosed, before she found a lump. One of her best friends killed himself. 2 of her family members died, and she was fired from her job. These are traumatic, stressful, what I call cancer triggers, right? That, can beat you down and suppress your immunity. And so you have to be very, very careful. I mean, sometimes you have no control. I mean, she had no control over those events, right? These are other things happening.
Right.
But when you don't have an anchor in your life, then you're like a ship being tossed about, by a storm.
Yeah.
You don't have any anchor. If you don't know your purpose in life, if you don't understand that there's a God who loves you, that wants a relationship with you, then all the events in life just kind of bounce you around, and you end up way off course.
Right. Yes. And I think this is a point of, let's root this one, because I think for most people, when you think of cancer, the first question I asked you was there any history in your family? So that usually is, it's a hereditary thing. But what you're saying, and what we know, and what Fran Drescher was saying, is that we can create illness in our lives by the way we live our life.
Yes.
And we can create good health by the way and the choices and the decisions we make with our choice. And so
Yes.
this stress business, and we're running out of time, but I wanted to get that last thing that you said on the video in, because I think it is one of the most important things. And it was one of the last lines in the movie I just saw, Unbroken, which is the way forward is forgiveness.
Yes. Totally.
and
So huge.
and not, yeah, without forgiveness, you have a lot of stress in your life. If you run your life on bitterness, and you run your life on resentment, and you run your life on hatred, you're going to make yourself sick if you're not sick already.
Absolutely.
I know that's, my dad, I love my dad, but I know one of the reasons why he got ill was because he never had that faith and that release with anyone around all the things that ailed him inside. Wow. He was living in an emotional hell, but he never did anything, and he didn't take care of that. And I know that led partially to his dying of lymphoma. So I think that last key, how are we living our lives? What choices are we making when it comes to our own emotional health is critical.
Well, I don't doubt that one bit about your dad, because I hear that over and over and over again. I mean, when I talk to cancer patients, that's what I hear. I mean, they just are they're just in a stress nightmare.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that we always talk about and that I promote constantly, yes, it's forgiveness, forgiving every person that's ever hurt you in life. Let them go, give them to God, and just literally just make a decision not to hold it against them anymore. Yes, they're a terrible person. Yes, they hurt you. But bitterness, resentment, and unforgiveness literally will poison you alive.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt someone else.
Yeah, that's a good one. My version of that is, I hate you. I don't want to look at you. So I'm going to gouge out my own eye so I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
It's so, yes. Well, we're done preaching to the choir. It's been so wonderful. We can find you at chrisbeatcancer.com.
Yes,
and
thanks,
absolutely. And he's been kind to give my Asian Oprah giveaway today is a free consult with Chris. So if you have cancer, you just got diagnosed, or someone who has, here's a man who stage 3, almost stage 4 colon cancer, was just about to launch into the traditional, the easy way to treat it, and leading to, not very successful, as we can see from people who do go through chemotherapy, my father included. And here is a man who is living proof that radical changes to 4 areas of his life can make radical changes in his lifespan. And so I know that this is your purpose. That I'm sure you wouldn't have chosen it, but in some ways, I think it's a blessing that you are doing what you do as a direct result of the situation that you were in. So thank you for your faith.
I'm definitely blessed.
Yes,
definitely
I can
blessed.
hear
Thank
it.
you.
I can hear it. And that's it. Thank you. And you get your your love and applause, Chris Wark, Memphis, Tennessee, chrisbeatcancer.com. And we're almost out of time. We actually are out of time. So I'm going to try to squeeze in the balance bar at the end of. I am broadcasting live from Canada. I hope you enjoyed that very, very informative Throwback Thursday from the treasure chest of my plethora of fabulous interviews, 1,372 now. And that was Chris Wark. You can find him at Chris Beat Cancer. I just sent a message to him asking him to celebrate my 13th year on camera, on the air. And so hopefully he will be able to come that second week of May. And the whole week of the whole month of May, I will be celebrating. Let me pull his website up. I'll be celebrating 13 years on the air.
Chris beat cancer. There it is. Here we go. Share this tab. And wow, he has come so far too. He's continuing to do it. 20, let's see, I saw it somewhere, 21 years cancer free. And he beat it with a very unconventional way, not on the conveyor belt of the traditional that he spoke about. And I am so grateful to to be able to bring his interview back and invite him back and just highlight the great, fabulous work that he has been doing. All right. And that's it for Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, AM 1050, FM 106.5, NBC News Radio, home to the Asian Oprah, number one talk in the IE. Thank you very much. Here every weekday morning. Tomorrow will be Straight Talk with Ricky Rebel. It'll be wonderful reconnecting with him. I haven't seen him for a couple of weeks, but we'll catch up tomorrow. So please do come and enjoy that show tomorrow, 12 Eastern, where I am right now in Canada, 9 Pacific time, where he will be in California. And thanks again so much for joining me today. It is all about balance. Peace in, peace out, world peace through inner peace. Now go and have the best day ever. I'll see you tomorrow.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.